Good afternoon, class. This is Mrs. Staksakis. Sorry I couldn't be there today, but here's your lesson. Our goal for today is to be able to graph angles in degrees and radians. But before we do that, we got to go back to Algebra 2 and remember what is a quadrant. Let's go ahead and take a second. You probably have a nice ruler that can draw some nice straight lines. If we go through and label our quadrants, if you remember, this was quadrant 1. This was quadrant 2. This is quadrant 3. And finally, quadrant 4. Good thing we just had that flashback to what a quadrant is, because today we're going to talk about quadrant angles. Let's go ahead and read what it says right here. It says, if the terminal side of an angle in standard position, remember, standard position is an angle that has its initial side on the positive x-axis So if the terminal side of an angle in standard position lies on the coordinate axes, then the angle is classified as a quadrant angle. The first type of quadrant angle, if we go ahead and draw our coordinate plane, is actually a 90-degree angle. Quadrant angle, we just said, is an angle that is classified with its initial and terminal side lying on the actual axes. This is a 90-degree angle with its initial side and its terminal side on the axes. The second type of quadrant angle is 180 degrees, or a straight angle. So if we begin with the initial side on the positive x-axis and its terminal side now on the negative x-axis, we have a quadrant angle, and it's 180 degrees. The third quadrant angle, I'm sure you've been able to guess, is the angle that begins or has its initial side on the positive x-axis and its terminal side lies on the negative y-axis. And this is a positive 270-degree angle. The last type of quadrant angle is an angle that starts or has its initial side on the positive x-axis and that goes all the way back around and again has its terminal side on the positive x-axis as well. Can you guess what this one is? You guessed it, 360-degree angle. These are the four types of quadrant angles. Now that we've identified the four different types of quadrant angles, we're going to be given different types of angles that lie within our circle on the coordinate axes, and we're going to start classifying all of these different angles by their quadrant. So to classify an angle by quadrant, we have to determine which quadrant the terminal side of the angle lies. Remember to keep in mind that all the angles that we will be drawing are going to be in standard position. The first thing I like to do is obviously draw my coordinate axes and label the quadrant angles. 90 degrees, 180, 270, and 360. 95 degrees is greater than 90, but less than 180. So in order to draw this angle and identify which quadrant it falls in, We're going to draw its initial side and terminal side slightly after 90 degrees. It's a positive angle, so we show it with a positive arrow. And we identify that 95 degrees lies in quadrant 2. In B, if you notice, there is a difference between A and B. This one is negative. If I'm looking at a negative angle, we talked about yesterday and the day before that negative angles are angles that open clockwise. Our initial side is still going to begin here on the positive x-axis at 0. Now, instead of going and opening up our angle counterclockwise, we're going to open up clockwise. So now this is negative 90, negative 180, negative 270, and negative 360. Where does negative 172 fall? Well, we know that 172 is bigger than 90, but less than 180, so negative 172 will do the same. It will fall in quadrant 3. Don't forget your arrows. Now, letter C. 360 degrees, I know that goes all the way around, but where does 550 come into play? Any ideas? Well, I know I'm going to start my initial side here at 0. And I know it's positive, so this will be 90, this will be 180, this will be 270, and 360. Well, what if I keep adding 90? I know this is a quadrant, and a quadrant is the same as a 90-degree angle, right? This from 0 to 90 creates a right angle, so I'm going to add 360 and 90 together to get 450. My next angle, or quadrant angle, will be 540. And the next angle that lands on the quadrant is going to be 630. Where does 550 land? Well, 550 lands right after 540. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my terminal side in there. But how do I show that I went around twice? Well, you're going to take your arrow, and instead of stopping at 360, you're going to continue on until you get to your terminal side. So it'll look kind of like a snail. Negative 225, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. You've got 0, negative 90, negative 180, negative 270, and negative 360. Where does negative 225 fall? Your initial side always starts in standard position, and it falls somewhere between 180 and 270. Don't forget your arrow. Alright, E and F, the final two. 1105. 1,105 degrees. How do you suppose I'm going to find where that one is? It's actually very similar to C. There is a shortcut. I know that 360 degrees makes one circle. Well, I wonder how many circles or how many times 1105 goes around. So I'm going to take 1105 and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide it by 360. When I divide it by 360, what do you get? You get 3.0 ... Doesn't really matter about the rest. We know that it goes into it exactly 3 times. So 360 times 3 gives me 1080. 360 times 4 actually gives you 1440. So how is that going to help me? Well, I'm going to take 1105 and subtract 1080 to figure out what's left over and where I'm going to land. So 1105 minus 1080 is 25 degrees. Do you know where 25 degrees is? Of course, it's in the first quadrant. So we got quadrant 1. Here's my initial. We end up in quadrant 1, but I went around 3 times. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3. So we end up in quadrant 1. Alright, I will let you work on F. Alright, hopefully you took some time to figure it out. You should have gotten an angle measurement of negative 180 degrees. Negative 180 means obviously we have a negative angle. We're going to go ahead and start our initial side on the positive x-axis. And then our terminal side is actually going to lie on the negative x-axis as well. Don't forget your arrows, and we also are going around 6 times. Because you guys are using a pencil, it'll be easier for you guys to show it, but 1, 2, and so forth. And that was our lesson for today. Hopefully by now you have a greater understanding of how to classify angles by quadrant and what the 4 main quadrant angles are. See you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye-bye.